In 2019 and 2020, Israel somersaulted through 3 cycles of elections that resulted in a shaky, forced, and oftentimes cringeworthy coalition of 2 opposing political blocs. This coalition was predictably short-lived, and Israel is now back to square one, or shall I say square 4, 4th election cycle in less than 2 years. So one might ask, what could possibly be different now than it was in the previous 3 elections, just a few months ago? Well, Israel is a dynamic society, and the macro politics of the Middle East are always on the move. So things are different now. Now, previous elections were about right versus left and left versus right. Not this time, though. This time, polls predict a clear 65 to 70% win for parties that self-identify as a right wing. Does it mean that the Israeli right wing or Netanyahu are to win? No, because this time it is not about left, right ideas or parties. It is about what the Israelis call just Bibi versus just not Bibi. Bibi, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is simultaneously revered by some Israelis while despised by others. And parties are now positioning themselves not only in the right or left-wing bloc, but also in just Bibi or just not Bibi camps. And make no mistake, just not Bibi is not just for left-wing parties. A prominent right-wing Likud member, Gideon Sa'ar, had quit Likud to form his own party, New Hope. Sa'ar was joined by a few prominent Likud members and by former Israeli Consul General in New York, Danny Dayan.
New Hope was formed because we got to the conclusion that 13 years is too much for Netanyahu to be prime minister.
Sa'ar is considered to be more hawkish than Netanyahu.
I think that the Palestinian Authority has enough money in order to pay salaries to terrorists, to murderers, to those who are getting a reward.
That said, Sa'ar specifically vowed not to join coalition with Netanyahu. And another important development is the collapse of the Blue and White Party headed by the former Chief of Staff, Benny Gantz. Gantz was the big promise of the 2020 elections, but after joining Netanyahu's coalition, his political allies had divorced him, and so did the voters. According to the polls, Gantz might not even pass a minimum threshold required to sit in the Knesset. The Israeli pre-election scene looks very fragmented right now. Former allies chip away and morph into smaller parties, dividing all sectors of Israeli society. Right, left, center, religious, Haredi, secular, Arab, they all have at least 2 parties competing in each niche. According to the polls, the Likud, a moderate right-wing party led by Prime Minister Netanyahu, seems to be the only one maintaining its gravitas. With projected 30 seats, it is far ahead of the right-wing Gideon Sa'ar's party and center-left Yair Lapid's party. Netanyahu's popularity is still relatively strong among Israelis. Even his indictment and trials seem to have the opposite effect on the voters, and the Likud party received record number of votes in the last 3 cycles of elections. Netanyahu's campaign is focusing on recovering from the pandemic. Relatively low death toll, relatively reassuring economic indicators, securing shipments of anti-COVID vaccines, and world-leading numbers of vaccinated. All that, in combination with normalizing the relations with 4 Muslim states, assures a continuing support for the Likud party. Many Israeli Arabs are impressed by the sights of Israelis visiting Dubai and hanging out with their new Muslim friends. These Arab voters start to question the paradigm of political resistance and are now considering giving their votes to right-wing parties, even to Likud. With all that fragmented political landscape in mind, there are 3 possible outcomes to this election, plus one more bonus outcome. Option 1, the Just Bibi parties get more than 50% of the votes and form a stable government. The chances for that are 50-50. Option 2, a coalition of Just Not Bibi, left, right, and Arab parties form a majority coalition. This is also 50% possible in terms of numbers, But to seat all these opponents in one government would require a lot of compromise and acrobatics, which will lead to an unstable government. Option 3 is that Gideon Sa'ar, a hard-right former Likud top gun who now runs independently, will disavow his own promise not to sit with Bibi and join Netanyahu's coalition. Promises. Stranger things had happened in politics. And this scenario will lead to a very stable and hawkish right-wing government. And the last bonus option, that is actually quite probable, is that none of these scenarios take place. Just Bibi camp won't get enough votes, the left and right anti-Bibi parties won't be able to find a common ground, and Gideon Sa'ar will stick to his no Bibi campaign promise. In that case, I will see you in a couple of months in another video explaining about Israel's 5th cycle of election.